I also pre-drill the batten lying underneath the corrugated iron for two reasons. It helps me install the roofing screw more gently into the timber so I don't distort the corrugations, and also helps me double check that I'm not running into a screw head from the batten installation process.
You come and go like a monsoon rain. You hide and show like a lightning bolt. You have it all.
In this video series, I take you through the process of how we created this backyard art studio. It features 3 large windows and glass doors to allow natural light to fill the interior. It also includes an outdoor covered awning space with a hardwood batten privacy screen. We chose to use passive house design systems in the construction to make the most of the year-round weather conditions. In the last episode, we completed the timber-treated battens on our walls. This is what creates the 27mm air gap between the insulation and the cement sheet cladding in our rain screen. We were then able to complete the bug screen, which stops insects being able to enter the drainage channel at the bottom of our air cavity. I had one last piece of pre-painted roof framing to install before we could start the process of adding the marine ply sheeting, which will form the ceiling of our roof system. In this episode, we'll complete all the other elements for our roof, including running electrical wires for the lighting system and completing the edge of the plywood ceiling, then adding the membrane, insulation, battens, and finally the corrugated iron sheeting for the roof. The corrugated iron is the final layer of 6 that make up the roof of our studio. Under the iron, the treated timber battens create an air gap for condensation to collect and evaporate out of the roof. The battens are laid on top of 25mm thick foil board insulation that creates the thermal barrier that'll keep it warm in winter and cool in summer. The breathable membrane waterproofs the marine ply panels that create the ceiling and add shear strength to the roof rafters. Before covering the marine ply with the other elements of the roof, I want to run some electric cabling for the lighting of our studio. Our electrician has started the process of running electric cables through the walls of our studio in the standard way, but because we have exposed roof rafters and a plywood ceiling, we're going to run the cables through the top of the wall and on the outside skin of our ceiling to keep the cabling invisible on the inside of our exposed roof rafters and plywood paneling. Here I'm helping the electrician run cables across the top of our plywood ceiling through holes we drilled through the roof rafters to keep the wiring invisible on the inside.
Every step, every breath, for you, my head's up over the clouds. For you, if there's a valley, I'd build a bridge so that you could get by. Without growing so we could fly. Daydreaming is my new middle name. This is not a game for me. Imagining is my new best friend, and raise all I see.
Here the electrician's drilling a hole through the top of the wall plate so we can feed the main power source cable up onto the roof and back down into the corner where the switch will be for the lights. With the last of the cable run through the top of the wall, I start the process of fixing the cables in place by hammering cable clips onto our plywood ceiling panels. I always use a licensed electrician to supervise the wiring of my projects, which results in a safer and more reliable electrical installation.
Daydreaming is my new middle name. This is not a game for me.
With the electrical cables in place, we can now complete the plywood element of our ceiling by adding the strips of plywood on the outer edges of our roof. Earlier I took measurements of the gap in our roof so I could manufacture some plywood strips on the ground where it's safer and more efficient. After marking my material out with a straight edge, I find it easier to cut plywood like this close to the ground. This way I can walk along the side of the plywood sheet as I'm cutting it and keep good control of the saw.
Peel off the layer and breathe. Lift up your head and leave. Count the stars up before you leave. Save a kiss, pretty please. Try to reminisce over me. Know that I will cherish your memories.
By laying the marine ply strip parallel to its final position, I can easily mark the cutouts so it'll fit around the cables we installed.
Peel off the layer and breathe. Lift up your head and lead. Count the stars up before you leave. Save a kiss, pretty please. Try to reminisce over me. Know that I will cherish your memories.
With the strip on the low side of the roof complete, I move my attention to the high side of our roof where we have to add another plywood strip. This one goes on much easier as I don't have any cables to cut around. This completes the marine ply paneling for our ceiling, which is the first of 6 layers of material we'll be adding to complete our roof. There was rain predicted overnight, so we covered the roof with a large tarpaulin. I wanted to keep the marine ply ceiling dry as possible so we don't trap any moisture with the extra layers of material we'll be adding over the next few days. I temporarily screwed down treated timber battens that we'll be using later in our roof construction, so the wind wouldn't blow the tarpaulin off during the night.
Give me tears so I can cry. And give me life so I don't die. Give me tears so I can cry. And give me life so I don't die.
I'm using the same breathable membrane material we used on the walls. Because we'll end up with a second layer of waterproofing with the foil board insulation, it's important that this membrane is breathable so it doesn't trap moisture under the insulation. I'm using lengths of treated timber batten to hold it in place whilst I tack it into position. I'm only tacking the membrane on the edges so I don't make any unnecessary penetration points that water could leak through later.
Give me tears so I can cry. And give me life so I don't die. Give me tears so I can cry. And give me life so I don't die.
With the first piece secured, I start rolling out the second piece. Because the membrane roll is 2.7 meters wide, we can cover the roof in 2 passes with a 200mm overlap. After getting the edge of the membrane secured on the side of the roof, it's important to roll it out square and flat without any creases in the membrane. I do it in manageable sections using the battens to help hold it down so the wind doesn't get underneath it. When I get to the end of the roof, I cut it off the roll and tack it in place, making sure it's flat and wrinkle-free. The last step in the installation of the membrane on our roof is to tape the 2 pieces together along the center of the roof. I also add tape over the tacks around the edges, so we have a waterproof membrane covering the entire roof surface. The second layer of our 6 elements we're adding to our roof will be the 25mm thick foil board insulation. This will help keep our studio warm in winter and cool in summer. Installing the foam board has similar difficulties to the installation of the membrane, managing ultralight materials in windy conditions. To help hold the foil board in place, I'm using a combination of my battens and an off-cut of marine ply. This way I can kneel on the fragile foil board whilst taping it in place without crushing it. I'm using the same system to install the foil board on the roof as we did for the installation of the walls. I use foil tape to lock in each corner of the sheet and then use more foil tape along the seams to give it a more stable contact with the roof.
Mud on your boots tell the story of where you've been. Travel, beat up, worn in with settled soul. Trust your gut, you have earned at least that. Age has proven to be kind. Age has proven to be kind.
With the first row of foil boards secured in place with the silver tape, I install a batten on the leading edge of the roof. This will help secure and hold them in place overnight so the wind won't blow them off by the morning. I'm using 100mm 14 gauge screws to fix the batten in place because it has to go through 27mm of batten, 25mm of foil board, 6mm of plywood and then anchor into the rafter. The next morning I spend a bit of time drying the condensation off the roof in an attempt to not trap any unnecessary moisture under our foil board insulation. The next piece of foil board we're installing is going to require some customization for the electric cabling we ran over the top of the plywood for the lighting in our studio. I need to cut a channel out of the foil board that matches the electric cabling. This will allow the foil board to sit flat on our roof. I'm using my set square to transpose measurements onto the foil board that match the curved layout of our cabling. This will ensure an accurate cut.
Love heart is not in vain. Scar earned by the good fight. Weathered skin from the sun. We're proud you have lived well.
With the channel clearly marked with black felt pen, I set up an improvised cutting bench so I can cut the foil board without damaging the membrane. I'm using a timber saw to make the cut as the foil board's really soft and the trick is to cut it without breaking it. When I'm satisfied the first piece fits around the cables, I tape it in place and then add the second piece. Here you can see how we've left a channel for the cabling so we don't create a lump in our roof. As I continue adding foil board to the roof, the cutout for the cabling becomes much simpler because it's set in a straight line at this point. I'm filling out the void we created for the wiring with a thinned out piece of foil board, then taping it over with silver tape so it'll stay in place and remain waterproof under the corrugated iron. There's a couple of reasons why I've chosen to install foil board on our studio in this way. Solid polystyrene foil-backed battens are waterproof and won't retain any moisture. This helps avoid any mold or mildew being trapped in our walls or ceiling. And by installing it on top of the rafters and plywood bracing, I can achieve an unbroken thermal blanket of insulation which avoids thermal bridging where a lot of the R rating is lost in an insulation system. As I'm coming close to finishing the installation of the foil board on our roof, here I'm using an alternative way to create a channel for the cable that's on the plywood so we don't end up with a bump in the foil which would interfere with our batten and corrugated iron we'll be adding on top.
But there's some words that I just wanna say, to put it all straight before this night turns into day, and then I'm on my way. Yes, I'm on my way. A bit naive and so eager to please. You know I played for love, but it got me on my knees. Now's the time to reap what I've sown. it's echoing in every single bone. Underwater, so far out at sea, there's no cure for what you're telling me, and soon I'm on my way.
With the 25mm foil board insulation secured, the next step is to install our 27mm thick treated timber battens. This creates the air gap under the corrugated iron where condensation will form and evaporate out. The battens align directly with the rafters, providing an anchor point for the screws in the roof. To ensure I'm installing the battens directly on top of the rafters, I'm using a story stick I prepared earlier that has the exact layout of the rafters clearly marked on it. When the batten's aligned with the mark on the story stick, I screw it in place and then move the story stick to the next fixing point, double checking that it's aligned with the top of the roof to keep the layout accurate and parallel. To make things easier for myself, I pre-drilled all the holes in the battens on the ground, following our 600 on center layout. The story stick template matches the roof width exactly, so I can align it from either end. I'm using the same process to fix the screws in on the roof as we did with our wall battens. After drilling a pilot hole, I work the screw back and forth so as not to put too much compression on the foil board.
You said, let me tell you everything I've seen, the friends I've made, and then you tell me how you've been. Look a little closer, it's been quite some time. You gotta let me know if I'm out of line.
With all the roof battens in place, it's time to install the segue point between the low side of the roof and the back wall. I've designed it so the condensation gap in the wall and the roof connect together at the low side of the roof through the drainage slots we cut earlier in our battens. All the battens we've used so far are 50mm wide. This last specialised batten is 150mm. This is to provide a sturdy anchor point for the guttering we'll be adding towards the end of the project. The 150mm wide batten has the same drainage slot pattern as the 50mm battens. This way the drainage channels will align perfectly, allowing an uninterrupted airflow between the roof and the wall. I'm attaching this batten the same way we've attached all the battens, using heavy 14 gauge timber screws. Here you can see how we've created a strong and crisp corner for the transition between the low side of our roof and the back wall. This is a really important part of the eaveless design of this side of the studio. The final step in completing the battens for the roof is to add pieces along the side of the roof in between the 50mm battens. I'm using the same thickness of batten material, but these pieces will be 150mm wide. I pre-cut all the pieces on the ground and pre-drill all the holes in preparation for installation on the roof. An important part of prepping my material is cutting out any large knots, as they create weakness in the planking.
Spending Sunday at the gym, trying to fit in. Counting the days until I meet my future husband. I try to be kind to myself. I said, girl, you got this. A whole lot of ticking, not enough time, not enough time. A whole lot of sweat, trophy wide, boys, trophy wide. The clock keeps ticking, still running out of time.
That completes the treated timber battening for our roof. The next stage will be preparing the corrugated iron for installation. I was able to order the zinc-coated sheets cut to the correct size straight from the supplier. So the only preparation I need to do is to pre-drill my holes for the screws that'll be holding the corrugated iron onto the battens and rafters. Having them laid flat on this pallet will create a good temporary workbench for this process. To mark out our screw holes, I'm using the same story stick we used to align the battens with our roof rafters. This is a really accurate way to ensure all our holes end up in complete alignment with the roof rafters, and it's a lot quicker and more efficient than using a tape measure. After transferring the marks on our template story stick to both sides of our corrugated iron, I use a straight edge to make the rest of the marks in the middle of the iron using a permanent felt tip marker. There are a couple of different screw patterns you can use for fixing corrugated iron to your roof. I'm choosing to have a screw in every second corrugation due to the heavy wind loads we have in our area. After adding a piece of timber under our pack of corrugated iron to help stabilize it, I start the process of using a metal punch to create small dents over our black marker. The dents created by the hole punch will help stop the drill from slipping off the top of the crown of the corrugation. This is important to help avoid scratching the zinc off the tin, which will lead to rust later on. I use a brand new bit for the drilling process and take my time and let the drill do the work without adding too much pressure on the drill. Many professional roofers wouldn't bother with this process, as the roof screws are designed to drill their own holes in place. But for people like myself who don't do a lot of roofing, this can avoid a lot of problems later when it comes to the installation of the corrugated iron, and helps you avoid putting any screws in the wrong place. The final step in our preparation is to clean all the swarth off the iron that's left over from the drilling process. The iron filing swarth can rust and cause staining on the roof later, so it's really important to clean up after the drilling process.
9 to 5 was my dad's advice. Don't think twice, I want the luxury life. My beauty can lose it, I'll use it, I'll take what I want.
Here you can see how easy and efficient it is to install the screws through our pre-drilled holes into the battens. The idea is to be quite gentle with the installation of the roofing screws to help avoid distorting the corrugation, which can lead to alignment problems later. Once the first sheet is secured, I bring the next sheet up onto the roof. Each corrugated iron sheet needs to overlap the previous sheet by one corrugation. This is what stops the water getting in the roof. I'm using some offcuts of OSB and framing material to give me support platforms to help avoid damaging the foil board insulation or the corrugated iron as I install it. As each sheet is installed, I double check with my tape measure that the layout is remaining square to the roof.
A whole lot of ticking, running on time. A whole lot of work, trophy wide, like me.
I'm using a temporary ramp I constructed earlier to help get the tin on the roof without scratching it or injuring ourselves. For safety reasons, I'm only bringing one sheet up on the roof at a time, then fixing it in place before bringing another sheet up. This helps avoid the wind blowing off the corrugated iron, which can be dangerous and also damage our material. I repeat this process until I have all the sheets secured on the roof. I then start the final process of the roof installation by going over each sheet and making sure I have a screw installed in each hole we pre-drilled earlier. I also pre-drill the batten lying underneath the corrugated iron for two reasons. It helps me install the roofing screw more gently into the timber so I don't distort the corrugations, and also helps me double check that I'm not running into a screw head from the batten installation process.
Slow traffic cause me stress. No panic, I'm just born in a dress. And I know that I'm older, I'm done. I'll do what I want. I'll do what I want. Spending some time to think. Counting the days until I meet the future husband. I try to be kind to myself. I said, girl, you got this. A whole lot of ticking, not enough time, not enough time. A whole lot of
design installed, that completes the 6th layer of elements that make up the passive house design systems for our roof. This is a major step in the construction of our studio, as it enables it to dry out, allowing us to install other things like the windows and interior wall sheeting. Join me in the next episode as we install our 3 windows and 2 doors and make a start on the exterior cement sheet cladding.
Could you hike back to it, fight with it, sit with it?